Well, that's why you're here, because I'm telling you that's what you need to think about.
Yeah.
All these 10 items, you need to think about these 10 items.
Yeah.
Because it's the difference between making it or not making it.
Welcome to Mastering Restaurant Revenue, turning restaurant dreams into significant profits. We're your host, Bruce Russo. He's the GOAT of restaurant design and build, having created nearly 600 money-making operations and earning a tower of national and regional awards in the process. And I'm Diane Armitage, 30 years leading a global marketing agency helping restaurants transform into profit machines. If you run a restaurant, you know margins are so tight and every decision matters. We're showing you how to maximize revenue from actual build-out to time and money-saving equipment, proper concepting and marketing, and the holy grail of them all, the guest experience. No fluff, no guesswork. This is a combined 75 years of proven strategies helping you create bigger revenue streams. Please like, comment, and share this to your industry peers. And let's get to it. Today is our episode 2, Space to Profit, Matching Restaurant Concepts with Revenue Boosting Square Footage. And hello, Bruce. How are you today?
I'm well. I'm doing well.
I'm glad to hear it. Great day. Okay, so most people turning in might think that this is about making more money in the day-to-day operations of the restaurant, like training and management. But in order to master your restaurant revenue, you got to start way back at the very beginning with a foundational understanding of two things. This is what we discussed in our first episode. First, Bruce's most important rule. You want to say what your most important rule is?
It must be designed. The restaurant must be designed to make money.
To make money. So a lot of restaurants will hire architects who don't understand the intricacies of the restaurants. And we referred to Bruce's great metaphor of manufacturing plants, that restaurants are manufacturing plants. And our second big point from the initial episode was that the vast majority of restaurant owners are not activating and leveraging the many pods of revenue available to them in a restaurant. Correct. So you may go into a one-pod mindset and say, we just got to make money in this whole place. But when you actually break it down to 4 or 5 or 8 or even 10 pods of revenue in fine dining, you can leverage every single option, right, Bruce?
Correct, because every pot of revenue functions just a little different than the other.
That is correct. So Bruce and I have worked with every concept imaginable, every category imaginable. And so I just wanted Bruce to kind of walk through the different restaurant categories. I know that most of, you owner-operators, restaurateurs, you understand all of this. But for our patrons out there listening, you may not understand that there are different restaurant categories with check averages for each. So I'm going to have you, Bruce, start at the I guess we would call it the lowest rung, what we would call fast casual, like fast food restaurants, right?
Right.
Okay. So what do you call that?
Fast casual, it starts to where fast casual concept does not have a dining room. Mm-hmm. It probably has a service window, a pickup window, and there is actually no dining seating available.
Right. And
it could be patios or something like that outside, but as far as the general interior dining seating, it doesn't have any.
And we have a couple of those. We have like Husky Boy hamburgers in North Laguna. It's just a counter, window, you lean on it. Papa Tacos over here in South Laguna, same thing. You lean on it, you give them your order, they give you your order out another window, you're good to go.
And that's how McDonald's was started.
Yes, indeed, it was. And then they began to add in the tables inside. So when you add it, so this is all called counter service. It's all called counter service because there's no wait staff helping you out or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay. So we've got the fast casual, and then we have the fast casual dine-in, I guess you would call it.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And then from there, where do you go to the next category?
Well, fast casual dine-in is probably something like somebody takes, you place your order when you walk in a queue line,
mm-hmm.
and then they have food runners that run your order out to the table in the dining room.
Correct.
Simple, easy breezy. not a whole lot of communication between staff and restaurant.
Okay.
We just want you there to dine and leave.
Right.
The quicker the better, so we can fill the chair next.
That's right. So if you're not standing over here waiting for your order, like at In-N-Out, you have your little ticket.
Correct.
Okay, so I have a question for you. We have this great restaurant. It's very progressive, called Abba in South Laguna. And you have to go up to a window and order, and they give you one of your little, table signs. And then you have to go to another window if you want to get something to drink, like a liquor drink or wine or beer. But it is a chef-driven restaurant. So I think sometimes in fast casual, you kind of start moving into different categories, right? Or platforms of fast casual.
Yeah, that's a pretty layered. If there's a chef, it's a chef driven, a chef physically there. That would be a hybrid concept.
Okay. And that's perfect for Abba because they're just hybrid. They're just hybrid all around.
Yeah.
So then when you're moving into dining also starts at fast casual and then kind of moves into fine dining. How do you define those different categories of dining with wait service?
Okay. Fast casual dining, the spacing of the chairs, the booths are much lighter, tighter together. There's no spacing between the booths. Your walkways are the bare minimum to meet code. The chairs are probably some of the most uncomfortable chairs you could possibly purchase.
For a reason.
Yes, for a reason. So, the chairs are typically hard service. They're hard surface chairs. That's where it starts, and then it goes up from there.
Mm-hmm.
The design for those is a little different. That's probably a $20 to $25 check average design.
And this is where you start having wait service, right? The lower level of the wait service.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and the check average probably 25 to 35, and it's minimal wait service. It's, it could be tacos. That's, everything's pretty well done in the back of the house. It's just a matter of plating it and warming it or whatever the concept is. And then it moves up from there.
Mm-hmm. So we have a great new restaurant in town called Finney's Craft House, and they have a pretty big space. They took over the old White House and completely remodeled that. It was a multi-million-dollar remodel. And so it is kind of like that. You kind of have somebody who comes and takes your order. There's not a lot of chit-chat. And, it's burgers, tacos, salads, pizzas, that kind of a thing. And then they kind of bring it back out again. And so I wouldn't compare it to like Lumberyard. Lumberyard.
Yeah.
I think Lumberyard is a little bit different because it's a little more, I don't know, maybe more personable, or the booths are cushier.
Well, it's a line cook kind of thing in the back of the house versus, an actual
chef.
An actual chef, correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have sort of what we would call the lower tier. That doesn't mean the food is bad. It just means that it's a lower tier of wait service.
Correct.
And so that's at about a 25 to 35 average. Then the next one up would probably be more like, I don't know, maybe family casual or casual, like a Lumberyard, which would be what kind of a price ticket? Maybe 25?
Be probably 40 on the upper side.
Okay.
But, now you're starting to introduce the alcohol segment.
Correct.
Okay. So, 25 to 35, your chances of, it may be wine and beer only, and that's kind of the line. And then to get to that 40 to, the 35 to 50 or 30 to 35 to 45, then you start to introduce the liquor, and, then there's things that go with that, with the menu. And so it becomes, the pods of revenue start to multiply.
Indeed. Okay. So then when we're moving from what we call casual dining, then we're starting to move into chef-driven dining.
Correct.
When do we draw the line, or when does the check average change for fine dining? Would that be the next one up?
Well, I've done many chef-driven casual dining.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's a chef-driven concept, but, we try and cap the ticket 55,
Mm-hmm.
55 to 60. There's that's some of the wine pairing starts to come into play. Maybe they have one steak on the menu, and maybe they have, two seafood dishes, but it's definitely what we see is it's basically the same menu every day, but the specials are where the big chef-driven ticket comes. And then that's where the wine pairings come in. And it's not fine dining yet, but it's fine dining with jeans and a T-shirt.
Fine dining Laguna style.
Yeah. So, that's kind of where we're at. And then from there, then it's clearly a straight notch up to where you get up to fine dining with a $200 ticket average. And, it's a serious wine selection, $1,000 bottle of wine or whatever it may be. And it's kind of the top tier.
Right. And then I would say of that fine dining, the top tier, we also have what we would call more of the upscale fixed menu, which is more of like the omakase or the prefix menu where you go in and the chef drives every single plate that comes out the door.
Correct. You have no clue when you make your reservation, you have no clue what the dinner menu is.
Correct. And it can vary from 8 plates to 20 plates. I remember once eating at Playground, which was a fabulous restaurant in Costa Mesa, kind of the Costa Mesa area. And they had a Playground 2.0, which was the chef-driven prefix menu. And there were only 12 seats at the bar. And one time they did every letter of the alphabet. They did 26 plates.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot. I was done by L. I was just like, it's full. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And so our Rebel Omakase, which is, of course, Japanese styled sushi and plating by a chef, they just won a Michelin star. They're our first Michelin star in Laguna Beach. And
oh, wow.
I think their check average is now $300 a person.
Yeah, that's about right. And that's the tier. That's the top tier. You start getting Michelin stars and it's a serious experience.
Exactly. Okay, so we've kind of come from counter service-ish, fast casual, into casual wait service, into finer dining, into top tier dining, right? And we've talked about the check averages along the way. Now, other than a town like Laguna Beach, because Laguna is very driven by, we don't have a lot of space for places. And most of the chefs want to drive down on square footage because it's such a seasonal town.
Correct.
We have a huge onslaught of people coming here in the summer. And then in the winter months, it's much quieter. But if you're in a town like Denver, Colorado, or Dallas, how does square footage work as far as when you start with the counter service, takeout window kind of thing, and working your way through those categories again?
Well, the first tier, casual dining, those concepts are around 1,000 square feet. You want to stay around 1,000 square feet. It's all just necessary square footage. It's typically four employees, maybe 5. It's basically kitchen staff and one person that is the connection between product and humanity side of customer line. From there, 1,000, we go up to 2,000. 2,500 is a good number for the next tier because it gives you enough kitchen space. It gives you seats for maybe 35 diners. And some of that could be counter service. Some of that could be sitting at the counter with tables and chairs mixed. The next level tier 2 of the casual dining scene, we're going to be 3,500 square feet. We're going to start, that's where we introduce booth seating, banquettes, a little bit more spacing on the aisleways. Acoustic segments start coming into play, because that diner is probably a 30-minute dining experience, 30 to 40-minute dining experience. So, we're not at the comfort levels of a Michelin star restaurant design, but some of those things start to be, I start to inject the acoustic things and seat spacing at that level.
Okay.
And then the next level, when we get up to chef-driven casual dining, it's serious seating. It's typically fabrics on the wall, a ceiling design that absorbs acoustics, and depending on the chef, we always like any kind of chef-driven concept. We like to have the chef on the stage, so to speak. We like the diners to be able, majority of the designers, the diners to see the chef at work.
Right.
We like to make it to where diners can see the flame and the sizzle.
Even if it's just a big chef's window.
Yes, but it's all about seeing the flame up and the smoke and the, it gives the diners a sense of partnership in their meal.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. Very nice. Yeah. Okay. So then you're going from chef-driven up to, chef-driven fine dining. Okay.
And we get to Michelin star. Majority of those designs that I do, it's a counter in the chef kitchen.
Correct.
And then the seating after those seats, the seating is focused around it to where everybody has a view of the chef.
Right.
And, we stair step the dining room or whatever the case may be, or raise the chef, whatever the design is that we're working on. It's all about him being on the stage.
Right. Or her.
Yeah.
So when I think of restaurants like that, Broadway by Mar Santana would be a perfect example for us. The Drake, Laguna Beach would be a perfect example for us, where you're actually,
sitting with the chef.
Right. You're seeing them, you're interacting with them, that kind of thing. Right. And then do you think that the square footage really changes between casual wait service dining versus fine dining, or is it all over the board?
Well, there's a stair step into square footage. What's necessary and what really needs to happen. That's 1 and 2. Number 3, what is your market and what's your competition and how many restaurants are available around you? I like 4,000 square feet as a sweet spot. You start to get over that. What we see happen is, in my opinion, operations has to go through a change, because from 4,000, you can push 5,000. And then when you get to 5,000, now it's not a chef-driven concept, because you're going to have a PDR somewhere, or
private dining room for those of you who,
or the dining room gets so big, you don't have the chef interaction.
Correct.
Okay, so you can do a chef-driven fast casual up to 5,000. But in my opinion, when you start pushing over that 5,000 square foot threshold, let's say you go to 6,000, the problem here is that you need, at 6,000 feet, you need the same overhead to run an 8,000 square foot restaurant.
Interesting.
Okay, so in my opinion, there's a void from about 5,000 to 8,000. I like to say I'm allergic to that square footage zone right there.
Between 5 and 8?
Yes. And then at 8, when you get to 8,000, then you want to be 8 to 12,000.
Right. And that's where you're adding in patio space, like we were talking about the other day,
Correct.
where you're starting to add in thousands of square feet of patio space.
Correct.
Yeah. That kind of an experience.
And now your kitchen at 12,000 square feet is a manufacturing plant. It doesn't kind of look like one. It is one.
Right.
Okay. And you would typically have 10 to 12, probably up to 15 people in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to where you go back to 4,000 and you got 3 to 5 people in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, one thing about the restaurant business, all the numbers run parallel.
Meaning,
you know, if you got 12,000 square feet, your revenue runs parallel with that. If you got 4,000 square, you know, you're not going to do 3 million a month out of 4,000 square feet.
mm-hmm.
There's a good chance you can do 3 million a month out of 12,000 feet.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could be a Michelin star and maybe get away with it if you're like a 2 or 3 star and you're working at about a 5K.
Well, but you see what I'm saying? I mean, but all in the restaurant, the numbers are always parallel. They always, revenue runs square footage. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's.
Well, you've said before that they need to be operating at a revenue level of, is it $1,000 per
$1,000 a foot
per square foot?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect number to work with. I love how you say that you don't like that black space between 5 and 8K because it's not so much an equipment issue. It's the operations.
It's the overhead. Okay. So, and here's the key about restaurant operation, restaurant design, and how they go hand in hand. You could have the people to run the place, but if you don't have the equipment, doesn't matter how many people you have. You can only put so many people at a saute station.
It's true.
If you got a 6-burner range, you're putting 2 people there. You're not putting 6 people.
Correct.
So that's where design, you know, I say it all the time, and you know I do. Design and operations are hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And the operations is a blank piece of paper until the design is brought to the table.
Perfect.
And then the operations adapts to the design that's been presented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you sit with the operations and, you know, the chef may want to do this or do that. And, you know, then there has to be conversation as to, well, we're not going to put 7 pieces of equipment. We're not expanding the kitchen to 50% of the restaurant.
Correct.
We're going to keep it at 30%.
That's
I like
the
to be
number
at 27 to 30% of the overall square footage should be your kitchen size.
Absolutely agree. Yes.
And once you get out of that, you know, it starts costing you some serious labor.
Mm-hmm. Well, going back to all of the experience you have as a specific restaurant design and builder, what categories of restaurants do you like working with the most? Do you have a?
I like the fast casual, chef-driven stuff, fast casual.
Mm-hmm.
And then I skip the gap and then I go to the 8,000. You know, I like the 8,000 and up.
Yeah.
You know, because when you get to 8,000 and up, you know, it's double digit. It's double digit pods of revenue.
Exactly. If you have those pods of revenue in place and operating.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they're all managed and, you know, then your operations becomes very tiered, and that being tiered works perfectly the way the design is tiered.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's when you start watching the machine work. And when you create the machine, you know, all you got to do is fill it with people every day, and it's amazing how the money's automatic.
Yeah, that's true. You know, I was talking about Laguna Beach and how we tend to have our restaurants pretty small, you know, 2,500, 3,000, maybe 3,500. And we had talked a bit in the first episode about Ivan Spears, one of our great restaurateurs here in town, who has opened 4 concepts. He's the only guy in the history of the town who's had 4 concepts active at the same time. And because of a series of unfortunate events that had nothing to do with his operations, he shut down 2 big restaurants he had that filled 16,000 square feet of space. So he had Bodega Laguna on the lower level at about 6,000 square feet. And then he had Skyloft upstairs in kind of the middle, but at the top tier of the building. And then he had the rooftop for Skyloft above that.
Yeah.
And what I think he is a genius at doing is putting in the pods of revenue at each location. And it was the only way that guy could have survived 16,000 square feet.
Absolutely. And I've been in all of his restaurants. I've been in every one of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, hats off to him because he understands the pods of revenue.
Right. I mean, I think about Mozambique, which was his first restaurant here. You know, now he's got a bar here. He's got a speakeasy here with its own bar. He's got a live entertainment, live music, arena now that he completely expanded last summer. He's got another big bar there. He's got private dining over here. He's got this here. He's got a lot going on. He's got a rooftop as well. And it's significant. It's fun when you see them really know how to operate the space and make that thing happen. Yeah. Okay. Well, now one other quick question I wanted to ask you about was there's this theory out there that you're not going to make revenue. You're not going to make solid in the black revenue until you have your 3rd restaurant. What do you say about that?
3rd restaurant at a location?
Well, I think it's just...
Or as an owner?
As an owner.
There's probably some validity to that.
What do you think?
There's always a saying. There's always a saying that, you don't succeed in business until you've been bankrupt twice.
Yeah.
And I think if we did some research, you would find some of the most successful people out there that are in business have been through it.
Mm-hmm.
But restaurant operations, it's, as you know, I mean, there's plenty that open and make a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty that made the mistakes and learn from it, and they avoid the mistakes, and they understand how to make revenue, and how to create the revenue stream, and what's important and what's not important, and what are all the details. I've said it thousands of times, and you know this, the restaurant business is probably one of the toughest to be in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But it can be one of the most rewarding also.
Right. Well, it is interesting when you have an entity, a company that owns 3 restaurants. Now, we're not talking, franchises or
Right.
chains. We're talking about somebody like, for instance, Chef Amar. He had the Broadway. Then he opened Vaca over at South Coast Plaza. And then he actually opened a food hall before COVID happened, and he had to shut that all down.
Yeah.
But, when they owned these different concepts, we had another chef who had a restaurant here, one in Orange and one in Dana Point. And it seems to me that when you're working a chef-driven concept and each concept is different, it would be a lot harder to create big amounts of revenue with 3 restaurants running back and forth between the 3 of them. But maybe, I also think that you can make plenty of revenue in 1 restaurant. But I've always heard that, you get the second one, you do the first one to learn the lessons, you get the second one to start making the revenue, and the third one is when you get over the top and you're really starting to profit.
And there's some validity to that. I mean, I'll agree with that because the client base, if the chef works the dining room properly,
Mm-hmm.
and the client base, clients love to when the chefs come to the table and talk to them.
They do.
And well, when that client knows that he has 2 other restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to go between the 3.
Mm-hmm.
So it's smart business if you have the capital to do it.
Yeah.
It's been my experience that if you're going to roll out a concept,
Mm-hmm.
you do 3. Because
The same concept?
Of the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's an upscale casual, if it's a casual chef-driven concept and you want to get an anchor,
Mm-hmm.
You want to anchor that concept, you open 3 and you open them 45 days apart. Because your marketing push on the first one continues to overlap, and the bang for your buck on your marketing is tenfold.
Well, that's great. How many restaurants do you know can actually open 3 restaurants within 45 days between them?
Well, we've done many.
Because you are the pro.
Well, but I'm just saying that, it's amazing to watch that success happen, because when they drive from Newport to Laguna to go to this new restaurant, and then they find out, you're going to open one in Newport. Well, now what happens? They don't come to Laguna, but the people in Dana Point go to the one in Laguna, and the ones that are now going to Newport, now the people from Huntington Beach are coming to the one. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So when you pull the trigger on that marketing, you don't have the spike in marketing, as you well know. What happens is that you get the spike, and then you get a level line until the third one opens before the decline of that marketing starts. But everything's pretty well cemented in the stone by then.
Right.
And all 3 are up and going. Now,
and you're saving so much. I mean, as far as the branding and the concepting goes, you're saving so much money. And just even the advertising messaging and all of that, because it's the same concept. Correct.
So 1 out of the 3 is going to be a dog. And that's,
that's the odds.
It's just Murphy's Law. But the 2 that make money carry the third one that doesn't. And the third one makes money. It's just seems to be harder for the redheaded stepchild, so to speak.
Interesting. Yeah, I've got a couple of the chef owners coming into my radio show in Laguna Beach. It'll be interesting to interview them because they all have 3 at least of this brand and 3 of this brand. And it'll be interesting to see if they have a dog in the pack. They may not tell me where it is.
Well, and the thing of it is, with 3, it gives you a good test market, because then you can start expanding the menu. And, after 3 or 4 months or 5 or 6 months, you get a pretty good idea of what your customer base palate is.
Correct.
Okay. And once you know that, then you start feeding that palate, then your profits start to go up even more.
Absolutely true. Well, this has been a great discussion. And, we've run our whole time frame of just talking about square footage and different kinds of categories.
Well, it's important. It's a very important key that, when we first meet with clients in our office, this is the kind of discussion we have. And you'd be amazed that a lot of them just kind of look at me like, wow, but I wasn't thinking that at all. Well, that's why you're here, because I'm telling you that's what you need to think about.
Yeah.
All these 10 items, you need to think about these 10 items.
Yeah.
Because it's the difference between making it or not making it.
It is the truth. It's just the truth. Well, we have so much more to discuss, but we're going to have to save it for other episodes. So our plan to talk about where to put your front door is going to have to move to episode 3.
That's okay. Well, we'll talk about that. And I think then we need to talk about, the lease negotiations.
Oh,
that's important.
So important. In fact, that may be what we talk about in the entire episode 3, because it is key. And the timing of it is key. Yes. As you go through the whole process of.
Oh, that's kind of where I'm leading to. It's more about how do you stage the lease and the timing with the lease and when you open, and it all works together, because the last thing the restaurant gods want you doing is paying rent on a space that's not making revenue.
Yes, and it's happened many a time. It's a woeful story. It's a woeful story. Yes. And, you and I are both gigantic proponents of the most important moment in the restaurant's history, and that is opening day.
Yep.
And you and I both work on this side of the opening day, this
Yes.
side of the opening day, long before opening day happens.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be fun to talk about. Well, thank you, my dear friend, Bruce.
My pleasure, as always.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to our episode here today. And we will be back for more. So stay tuned, and we'll be back with another episode soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.